And welcome to today's edition of Weathering the Storms of Life with the Ranges. Rob Raines, Sally Tippett Raines here at STLSportsPage.com as well as RainbowsForKids.org, our little daily quiz program that we've been doing ever since we had to start staying at home and get by without baseball. So we're back to doing some baseball-related quiz, and today we're going to talk about Ozzie Smith.
And it's funny because I started this week, I made a list of 5 inspiring quotes that were from Cardinal players. And it just so happened you decided to do the Ozzie Smith Day, and I have Wednesday. Ozzie was a quote from Ozzie Smith.
There you go.
So this was a quote: I may not drive in 100 runs a year, but I can prevent 100 runs from scoring against us. Ozzie Smith. Now, what that says to me outside of baseball is there are different types of people. Some are out there doing things we see, and some are quietly doing the best they can and making a difference for those around them. We can all see a need and reach out and grab an opportunity or catch a line drive to prevent a run and help others. So during this time we're in right now, as long as we look out to other people and see who needs us and how we can help others, it'll make our time a lot easier too.
And Ozzie's somebody, of course, that we've known for a long time, almost 40 years now since he came over to the Cardinals, and had the honor of writing 2 books with Ozzie over the years, including my first book, Wizard, came out in 1988, his autobiography, the first book that I ever wrote. And it's funny because I go back and look at it now, and I wish I would have a chance to rewrite it because there's a lot of things I would do differently. Not as far as telling his story is concerned, but just things I've learned over the years
Just
about
after 40 books or
how to
whatever.
write a book and how to expand on things. But it was a fun project, and was happy to do it. It was funny because it came about because of actually when the newspaper went out of business that I was working for, the Globe Democrat, in 1986. The fact that Ozzie has already played a few years for the Cardinals, and we had a very good relationship as a beat writer for the Globe Democrat, and he obviously one of the star players. And we had talked over a few times about, hey, at some point it'd be fun to do a book. Yeah, okay. So then when the paper went out of business, I remember specifically calling him on the phone and said, hey, if we're still thinking about that book idea, I got a little time available right now. So that's how it all started. Spent the year 1987 writing the book, and then it came out in 1988. So
You just can't say a bad thing about Ozzie.
not at all.
He's
No,
done
it's a
so
great
much
guy.
for individual people and so much for the city of St. Louis and just sports in general. And it's funny because with these famous guys, we've actually heard people say, oh, Ozzie Smith wouldn't sign my autograph. Well, he might have stood in line and signed 500 people, and you were the 500th person, and he had to get somewhere.
We saw many times in St. Petersburg at spring training at Al Lang Field. Ozzie was one of the best as far as sticking around forever, signing autographs, and his wife and kids would be sitting there waiting on him. And at some point, you have to leave. I mean, you can't stay there for forever. No matter how many you sign for days. And he did it, kind of like Stan Musial did. I mean, it was just he was kind of the continuation of that great ambassador for the ball club and for baseball in general. And I think he still continues to this day.
And 20 years ago when we started Rainbows for Kids, who was the first guy at the first party? He has donated his time to help us with Rainbows for Kids. Just an awesome guy. Oh, I wanted to mention when he went into the Hall of Fame, we got to go up there. Can you give some memories of
Cooperstown is a
Hall of
great
Fame?
place. Anybody who hasn't been to the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, I encourage you to go. We've been lucky enough to be there several times. The one piece of advice I would give you is if you really want to see the Hall of Fame and see the town of Cooperstown, don't go on induction weekend because it's just so crowded, so many people. Now, I know this year's ceremonies are going to be strange. There's possibilities that they're even going to be delayed or virtual ceremonies or something like that, which is a real shame since Ted Simmons is going to be going into the Hall of Fame this summer. The announcement's supposed to be coming here soon that about what they're going to do. The ceremonies are scheduled for late July. So, but yeah, Ozzie's weekend was just terrific. A lot of people there, a lot of Cardinal fans. We had a great time, and it was a real honor and privilege to be there. But our good friends the Millers were with us from Washington D.C. and as I say, luckily we'd already been to Cooperstown before and had been there since, so we didn't really have to worry about trying to get in the hall and see all the exhibits and stuff because that's just so crowded that it's hard to do that.
I think Kurt and Sarah Smith were there.
Kurt
also.
was there. Yep, took the boat ride on the lake. That was
Yeah,
fun.
that was really great.
It's a great place.
It was great, and Ozzie was just so great because even though he had been divorced, he invited Denise back, and his whole family was there, and he was just so gracious to everybody. And
Yeah.
it was a big thrill.
So we got 10 questions to see how well you know Ozzie Smith and his career over the years. So we'll get to those right away.
Number 1, what is Ozzie's real first name? Real first name of Ozzie Smith.
Yes,
Bonus point if you know his middle name.
exactly. If you know his first name, you probably know his middle
No
name.
kidding.
Okay. Question 2. When Ozzie first arrived in St. Louis, he made a bet with Whitey Herzog. What was the bet?
Number 3, other than the fact it was a walk-off home run, what was the most significant fact about Ozzy's home run off Tom Niedenfuer in Game 5 of the 1985 NLCS? And if you read this book, you might know some of these answers. Some
Exactly.
Of them.
Well, I may not remember that book because it came out a long time ago. But yeah, so again, what was significant about Ozzy's home run off Niedenfuer in Game 5 of the NLCS? Question 4, what other future Hall of Famer was a high school teammate of Ozzy's in Los Angeles? High school teammate of Ozzy's in Los Angeles. Locke High School in Los Angeles.
Which MLB team was the first to draft Smith in 1976 after his junior year of college at San Luis Obispo in California?
Question 6, who did Ozzy finish second to in the MVP voting in 1987 when a lot of people thought that he should have won the award? He finished runner-up to somebody else in the 87 MVP voting. Who was that?
Number 7, Ozzie Smith is one of 4 players who spent the majority of their career with the Cardinals to be elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame in his first year of eligibility. Name the other 3.
Question 8, Smith's number 1 is retired by the Cardinals. Before he joined the team, the number was also worn by 3 other players prominent in franchise history. Obviously, more people wore that, but the 3 most prominent players in franchise history to wear number 1 before Ozzy were who?
Okay. Number 9, one of Ozzy's sons became a singer and was a contestant on what nationally broadcast show?
2005, I believe, was the year that he was on there.
Okay.
Now, and question 10, Ozzie Smith was the Cardinals' starting shortstop on opening day every year from 1982 through 1995, except for 1 year, which was 1989. Who started in his place at shortstop in that opener of that season, 1989? Who was the Cardinals' starting shortstop ahead of Ozzie Smith on opening day? Okay. On to the answers. Ozzy's real first name and his middle name for the bonus point.
Osborne Earl Smith.
Osborne Earl. Okay. Question 2, Ozzy's bet with Whitey Herzog. The bet was for every fly ball Ozzy hit, he owed Whitey $1, and for every ground ball that he hit, Whitey owed him $1, because obviously Whitey was trying to get him to cut down on fly balls, knowing he was not going to be a big home run hitter, and so he said, okay, I'm going to encourage you to hit ground balls, and I think at the end of the season, Whitey owed Ozzy about $300.
Did he actually pay?
I'm sure he did.
He took the money.
I'm sure he did, yeah, why not? It was a bet.
That's a bet, you're
Exactly.
right. Other than the fact that it was a walk-off home run, what was the most significant fact about Ozzy's home run off Tom Niedenfuer in Game 5 of the 1985 NLCS?
It's his first career home run batting left-handed. Obviously a switch hitter, had more than 3,000 career bats. Left-handed, I believe, was the number, and he hit the home run right over the right field wall and made Jack Buck go crazy. Folks go crazy. And the funny thing about Jack's call, which obviously has gone down in history as one of the most significant calls of his long and Hall of Fame career, and when we did his book years later, he admitted to me he thought he had blown the call. He didn't know why he said it, and he just said it, off the cuff, and turned out to be, historic, but he thought he had messed it up.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What other future Hall of Famer was a high school teammate of Ozzy's in Los Angeles?
Eddie Murray, first baseman for the Baltimore Orioles, actually went into the Hall of Fame a year after Ozzy. It was interesting, too. He was also a high school basketball teammate of Marcus Johnson, who went on to have a celebrated basketball career as well. So, great high school.
What was the first MLB team to draft Smith?
Now,
in
you might
1976?
say the San Diego Padres, because that's obviously where the Cardinals
I
got
would
him
have said
from,
that.
but that is incorrect, because he was drafted in 1976 by the Tigers in the 7th round after his junior year in college and did not sign. I think they were about $1,500 apart on what he wanted for a signing bonus, and he ended up going back to school for his senior season and then was drafted by the Padres the next year after his senior year in the 4th round.
Okay. Question number 6. Who did Ozzy finish second to in the MVP voting in 1987 when a lot of people thought he should have won the award?
That would be Andre Dawson of the Cubs, who obviously had a very good season as well, but the Cubs finished last. And the quote from Whitey Herzog after that vote was announced was that the Cubs could have finished last without him. They didn't need Andre Dawson to finish last. So obviously Ozzy had a big part in the Cardinals winning the pennant that year, the 3rd pennant in 5 years, 6 years, but it didn't happen. That was closest he ever came to an MVP award.
All right, Ozzie Smith is one of the 4 players who spent the majority of their career with the Cardinals to be elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame in his first year of eligibility. Who were the others?
Obviously, three pretty obvious choices: Stan Musial, Lou Brock, and Bob Gibson. you might say Steve Carlton, but the way the question was worded was that the most of their career with the Cardinals, even though Carlton was a Cardinal Hall of Fame, was a Cardinals player before he went to the Phillies, most of his career, and went into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot, his most of his career was spent with the Phillies, which excluded him from our list.
Number 8, Smith's number 1 is retired by the Cardinals. Before he joined the team, the number was also worn by 3 other players prominent in franchise history. Who were they?
The most significant was Pepper Martin, also worn by Whitey Kurowski, and then, of course, Gary Templeton, the player traded for Ozzie Smith to the Padres.
One of Ozzy's sons became a singer and was a contestant on what nationally broadcast show?
That would be American Idol. Actually, the reason we started watching American Idol way back then was to watch him perform.
And his name was OJ. They called him OJ. He was a junior from Ozzy. And he changed his name for, like, he got a stage name when he was on American Idol.
Nico.
And we're not sure if this is right or not, but we had heard that being called OJ, maybe he thought that was a negative because it was around the time when the OJ Simpson trial
Was in
had
the news,
happened and didn't want to have any negatives. So
Yeah.
he's a really good singer.
Still
Nico
goes by
Smith.
Nico Smith, too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
it's still having a singing career.
And actually, we saw him. The first time we saw him was singing was in 1992 at the barbecue, and there might be somebody out there watching that remembers
I
this.
do, I remember
We
that.
did the Cardinal Rap, and we had a bunch of players up on the stage doing a song called the Cardinal Rap, and little O.J. Smith, who became Nico Smith, was up there singing, and he was like pretty much stealing the show. It was
Absolutely.
great.
That was good. That was good. Okay, and the question 10, the final question. Ozzie was the starting shortstop on opening day for the Cardinals every year between 1982 and 1995, except for one season, which was 1989. Who started at shortstop that year? It was not Royce Clayton. It was Jose Oquendo. That was before Clayton got to the Cardinals a year later on and lost and beat out Ozzie for the starting job. But Ozzie was hurt at the start of that season. He missed the first 6 games of the season because of that injury, so Oquendo was playing shortstop in his place. So.
And I wanted to mention another funny memory about this Wizard book.
Yeah.
One time, it was his first book, and we were all excited about it. And every time we'd go to a bookstore, you could always tell if the Rainses had been to a bookstore because Rob's
Face out.
book would be facing out. If it's in like that, we'd pull it out like this. And one time we went to a store, and we saw them on sale, and there was pretty much like 15 of them, and it was at a reduced price. And I looked at that thing, and I was like, I'm not going to have Rob's first book being on a...
Remainder table?
Yeah. So we went and bought all the books.
Yeah.
That was
Well, I thought the funniest part about putting it face out was there was one time years later we were at a bookstore moving another book around and putting it face out in the
Not that
bookstore.
we continued doing that throughout.
Oh, sure we did. But we saw somebody else doing the same thing, and it was Tim McCarver.
Oh, that's right.
I don't remember which bookstore it was, but it was at the time.
That's
It was funny. So don't think that doesn't happen.
Yeah, so if you see a book face out, it doesn't always mean that the bookstore put it out there. It could be
Exactly.
the person was shopping there or their family.
Yeah, so appreciate everybody tuning in, and hope you got all 10 for 10 on the Ozzie Smith questions. We'll be back with another edition of Weathering the Storms of Life with the Rainses tomorrow here on STLSportsPage.com, also rainbowsforkids.org.